This initiative was taken by our Dean, Professor Anantharatu, to commemorate the completion of 70 years of our school, tracing our history back to Supple House in 1955, when the Indian School of International Studies came into being. We've had 17 lectures so far, ranging from international studies in India, Nobel Prize in Economics, international law, India's development, its foreign policy, its quest for status in international politics. We've discussed China's foreign policy, delivered by a Japanese professor, Trump administration in West Asia, human rights, world as a family, globalization of public health, US and regime change in South Asia, India-Pakistan interface, future of the world order, and several others, including artificial intelligence-based digital technologies for agriculture. The lectures have been delivered by our alumni, reputed international analysts, academics, our former professors of the school. Today, we are very pleased to welcome the Spanish ambassador to India, His Excellency Juan Antonio March Pujol, also accredited to Bhutan, Maldives, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. A law graduate from the University of Barcelona, he has served as the permanent representative of Spain to the United Nations in Geneva, to WTO, and to other international organizations, and also as the ambassador to the Russian Federation. He has held senior roles in the European Union, served as the OCTE in Paris, and in Spain as Director General for Latin America. Ambassador March fosters cultural, educational, and economic links between Spain and its partners. And in New Delhi, he's actively promoted collaborations in trade, renewable energy, culture, and higher education. We are very happy that this session today will be chaired by Ambassador Kanwal Sibal, our own Chancellor. Ambassador Sibal is the former Secretary of India. He has been the Indian ambassador to Russia, Turkey, Egypt, and France. He's also served as member of India's National Security Advisory Board. In 2017, he was conferred with the Padma Shri for his distinguished service in the field of public affairs. He has also been awarded the scientific degree of Grand Doctor of Philosophy and has received the title of Full Professor from the European Academy of Informatization and World Information Distributed University. I now request Ambassador Kanwal Sibal to chair the proceedings.
Well, thank you very much for organizing this event. The Spanish ambassador was keen that he should have an opportunity to speak to at the JNU, and rightly so, because you are the premier postgraduate university in India, and you have a reputation, and many of your alumni are holding very, very important positions in national life, apart from other achievements. So it's the right place, especially the School of International Studies, for the Spanish ambassador to come and talk to you on a subject that is very much on everybody's mind: a world in deep change through the artificial intelligence and the political factor. Now, everybody knows that artificial intelligence is going to determine all aspects of our life going ahead. We're not quite sure how deep an impact this would be, but there are serious concerns that it will be extremely deep impact with a lot of potential negative elements to it. A person like Henry Kissinger, even in his old age, with all his experience, was very worried about the impact artificial intelligence will have on humanity. The big tech in America is investing immense amounts in order to maintain the lead in this sector at the company level. Forget at the national level, where United States very much wants to be in the lead, and they see China as a big competitor and a big threat. You can see international concern about artificial intelligence and the need to examine its implications, and look at the positives and the negatives. The the British have had an international conference on artificial intelligence. The French have had it, and India is organizing one in February next year. I think in order to have a discussion on this very vital subject, especially in some ways how to regulate and control the developments in artificial intelligence, which can have serious implications for humanity at large. Anyway, this is not an occasion for me to dwell on the subject, because we are here to hear the Spanish ambassador, who's written a book, incidentally, on artificial intelligence and the United Nations, is it?
The New Order.
The New Order. Yes, I was there at the launch of this book by the Jindal University some weeks ago. So he's obviously deeply involved in the subject, has deep knowledge of the subject, and having also worked in the United Nations, he sees the international dimension of this. So what we can do, Ambassador, is that perhaps you can speak for 20, 25 minutes, and then we can open the floor for questions and answers, because this is a subject which will provoke a lot of questions. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Sibal. I'm here under his invitation, and also the coordination with Professor Matu and Professor Singh. For me to be in the university is like being at home, because I was very much involved with university during a long time in Spain. I was member of the foundation of University Enterprise in Barcelona during more than 18 years. So I have been sharing the interlinkage of university with enterprises and with the citizens. So to come to university for me, it's quite important, because I think it continues to be the center of the ideas, of the nourishing the new ideas, you know. And as Ambassador Sibal was saying, I published recently a book that I'm very interested to be spread, let's say, in the new generation, because it was written during the pandemic. I was locked down in my house in Mallorca, and then my daughter came to see me and said, "You know, Daddy, this is a disaster, because the previous generation was very well prepared, and suddenly it came the crisis of Lehman Brothers. It was a small crisis in the United States, but it went into a big crisis in Europe, a little bit also in Asia, and the whole generation was blocked during 10 years. And now everything is taking off, and suddenly comes this pandemic, and it's going to be worse. All our expectations will be blocked." So I said, you know, I think I have to write a book that opens the mind of the new generation to see the great possibilities they can have, but at the same time, how they have the responsibility of moving the world from, let's say, the United Nations to the united humanity. And this is the geopolitical part of the book. So very shortly, just to say that if any of you have responsibilities in a department and thinks that the content can be very interesting for the youngsters, that is called, and to have a dialogue, we could always do next year along the year. You know, I go to many universities with a kind of interactive dialogue with the new generation. So the point is more or less the following: we are in an era of incredible new discoveries. We were in 1900 only 3 million people in the universities of the world, 3 million people. Today, we have more than 450 million people in the universities of the world. So the transformation is massive. It's true that in the numbers you see it, we were 4 billion people in the world in 1970, and we are today 8 billion people. We have multiplied, we have doubled an incredible large human population in the world. But the key thing is that the nature has already shown us that each individual is a great value. Why? Because if you see a fingerprint, only a fingerprint, the nature develops every time a different combination in such a small space that 1 centimeter of skin. So in the world, you have 8 billion different fingerprints. So it means that each individual is absolutely unique. So when you think about the neurons, the same thing happens. The combination of neurons of each individual is absolutely unique. So that is why we are now in a very interesting moment of this humanity experience, that we come from trying to survive and trying to fight against much more powerful animals during 100,000 years. And after that, to be organized in tribes, then in villages, then in countries, then in federation of states, then in international organizations, in order to be every time protected and to be able to develop intelligence or how to use our brain in innovation and finding new solutions. And now we are on the edge of this new period. And artificial intelligence is going to be an instrument, in my view, that is going to help us to discover the many possibilities of this world. For example, I was saying, and it is in the book, that obviously one important moment will be when we will discover that nature is much more intelligent than we think by decoding the language of the different members of this family of the planet. I am always very impressed in the mornings when you wake up and you listen to the birds. The birds are from 6 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock in the morning all the time chatting. They are not like the dogs or the tigers that they make a sound when there is a danger or when they want to show the strength. No, the birds are talking for 2 hours. So the problem is that we have not the code. It's the same that if you have someone from Denmark or from South Africa and you don't have the code, you don't understand a single word. You just listen to the sounds. The same thing happens with the birds, and there will be not one language. Maybe it will be like the humanity. It will be 2,000 different languages. But the day we will discover what the birds are talking in the morning, maybe we're going to understand another way of understanding the planet, etc. So it's full of new possibilities. The same thing happens with mobility. We have gone from moving just ourselves to know how to control some animals like a horse. Then we have invented some machines like the train, like the car. But now this era, the 21st century, will be the century of the aerial mobility. And that is going to change everything as the mobile telephone has changed the communication. I go a little bit back with the mobile. When I go to Ethiopia and I go and I see how much the country is scattered, you have just 7 million people in Addis Ababa, but you have 93 million people around the country. If they had to make the effort to communicate all these people through the land line of the telephones, they would be still totally unconnected. And suddenly, thanks the connection on the satellites, you go to many faraway parts in Ethiopia, and you find the people with a mobile unconnected. So the same thing is going to happen with the mobility. We have made an incredible effort to the communication through the roads. In the world, there were nearly no cars in 1900. There were just prototypes. It was 1905 when Henry Ford develops the factory of massive cars, 1905. And at that moment, there were nearly no road under asphalt. So from that moment to today, in only 125 years, we have made an incredible effort because today there are 3.5 billion cars moving at the same time in the world, and all of them go through pavement. So the number of land that has been expropriated, the number of tunnels, the bridges, well, it has been a massive effort, but it's very limitative because you can only live, for example, a city like Delhi, maybe by 25 or 30 roads. You cannot go in the middle of the field. Aerial mobility will be totally different, and the nature has already shown to you that aerial mobility is the safest way of mobility. Why? Because when you see the starlings, the birds, that they fly 5 million birds together, one after the other, but in groups and moving up and down and nearly blocking the sun of the light of the sun, there is never a single accident. Have you ever seen a bird crashing in the air and falling on you? Never. So the nature has already shown to you that if you put 100 the birds, never there are accidents, and it's not 100,000, there are 5 million at the same time flying. So in the future, this humanity, I think, will be totally connected by air. Obviously, the most important and difficult point will be regulation, because obviously now with the roads, as I said, there are 28 roads or 30 to go out of Delhi. The space is nearly infinite. You can go from many different roads. So it's a full transformation, but technology is going to bring it. I think that it will not take too much long. It will happen like the mobile, that I remember my 1993 was a very long set, very limited. Then in 1996, I had my first Nokia, more or less working well. And in 2005, there was already the first iPhone. And you went from paying a lot to have a conversation from India to Brazil and having a very bad sound. You have gone to have the call up in only 20 years or 25 years. So very fast. So my point is, this book tries to show to the new generation that everything is connected with innovation in all the fields. For example, I see here in India, and nearly nobody is talking on that. And I think the new generation should be much more aware of that. The key issue should be urbanism. People, I understand, like to go organically, let's say, but you can go organically when you have very few people. When you are many, you have to think a little bit how things will go. Today, India has more or less 48% of the people in the agriculture. This will fall dramatically in the moment that we will apply artificial intelligence or agriculture, as you mentioned. It will fall dramatically. In Spain, for example, in 1960, 20 years after the Civil War, we had 28% of the population in agriculture, 1968. In 2024, the data is we have 2.7. So we have gone from 28% to 2.7 only. So the moment that Indian population will go from 40% in agriculture to only 20%, it will be maybe 300, 400 people, 300, 400 million people will have to move to cities, to new cities or existing cities. At the same time, it is calculated that India maybe will have 200 additional million people in 20 years. So when you combine all that, the key element should be how we plan all these people will go. It has to be kept with freedom, that people can build the houses in different styles, but it has to be a certain planning, or where will be the hospitals, where will be the schools, where will be the residential areas, the non-residential, the factories, etc. And this can be, in my view, only solved at this moment with a very good use of artificial intelligence and architecture and planning. Yeah. So all this life is going to change, and I try to say to the students that obviously language will be no issue in nearly nothing, in maybe 2 years time or 3 years times maximum, because you will have your earpods, and one will be your translation from Hindi to Spanish, and the other will be the translation from Spanish to Hindi. So every time you will find a person and you want to communicate, if he or she has not the device, you will say, please take one, and we talk. And the big thing is that it will be the salvation, this technology will be the salvation of all our very rich heritage in languages in the world, because instead of going through one language, we will manage to keep all the diversity of this planet. Language is a very important issue. I remember an anecdote when I was in Brussels. We had the meetings in French and English from 10 in the morning to 6 in the afternoon. But sometimes the meeting had to go on after 6 o'clock. But at that time, the translators left. And the rule was that everybody had to speak in the non-native language. From 10 o'clock in the morning to 6 p.m., the delegate of France and the delegate of Great Britain at that time, because the meeting was in French and in English, look as the most sophisticated people in the meeting. So the British appear very, very wise, very sharp, very smart, and the French conceptually very rich. At 6:05, both of them look as the most stupid people in the meeting. They were struggling with the words, no nice concept. So it was the same brain, the same person, but was totally limited by the language. So this is going to be very interesting what's going to happen in the world in very short time. The same thing that happened with the mobile. Everybody will be able to communicate with everybody. You will want to go to Seychelles? Okay. You will not need any longer the English to communicate. You will be able to communicate in Hindi and Seychelles language very easily. Obviously, certain countries, and mine, the first, Spain, will lose a little bit with that, in the sense that people will go to Latin America and maybe they will not need to learn Spanish because they will be able to go there with their own language and communicate very easily. But this will be a new networking in the whole world. So we will have no blockage concerning languages, in my view, in the future, So this is one thing. But the second thing is also education. My feeling is that education will have to evolve to discover the top capacity of each individual. So we have gone in a very important process in education in the sense of preserving the knowledge of heritage through the professors. Before, it was just oral transmission during thousands of years. Then the writing has developed in very recent years, maybe only 10,000 years ago. We have passed the heritage through the writings, and then we have developed many different areas of knowledge. But this is nothing compared what would be the areas of knowledge during the 21st century. So the cool thing is that we have obviously created the structures to teach the students in classes with common knowledge, able to deliver this very initial era of knowledge. But in the future will be totally different. In the future, we will have to discover what is the combination of neurons, what is the different elements in the personality of the people, and see what is the capacity. So it's a big new era of transforming education. So my book has a whole trip on these new moments for the new generation, and has two elements that wants to combine also with that. One is to open the mind on the interest of discovering this planet, not only the nature, but also what humans have done. I have been by blessing of destiny with many rich people in this world, and sometimes when they ask them, have you visited Lake Baikal, where in Siberia in Russia, where the waves they froze with the with the movement of the wind, and at the end you have drops that goes from big one to very minor one, and you have all the light with the different angles and different colors. You say, oh, I don't know what is Lake Baikal. And have you gone to see the Valley of the Kings in Egypt? And say, oh no, it's something that is pending, and maybe has a private plane. And say, well, what are you looking? What are you waiting? Or have you visited the caves of Ellora and Ajanta? Oh, I had no idea this existed. And these are very powerful and rich people. So I try to say to the new generation, you cannot be dragged into disputes, into showing who is more powerful. You have to use at least this period of life to discover where you are and how you benefit of all that. This is one thing. The second is more in geopolitics, I try to say to the new generations that the nations are a little bit like the oceans and the rivers. As it says, a little bit the simile of the water. In the planet Earth, the water falls, let's say, with no order. But as soon as it goes to the Earth, it is taken in a certain order by the rivers. So the water tends to go toward an area where is united one drops with the others and to create a river. But what is the function of the river? Is to take this water to the ocean. So at the end in planet Earth, 98% of the water is the ocean, and only 2% is in the rivers. But the rivers have a very important function, that is to bring the water in order. Well, the same thing happens, in my view, with the nations. The humanity is dispersed in the planet. You have to create certain social order, to certain organization, to make the interaction of one to the other the most efficient and beneficial for each other. So you create at the very beginning villages, very small villages. These villages, they grow and they go into cities, they into nations, but these nations are like the rivers that they have to take all this energy of the human beings to the final ocean that is the one humanity. So the states are very important in this process as the intermediate bodies. But we have not to forget that the real protagonist of the history is the individual, the human being, and having each human being as a G1. Not the nation as a G1, but the human being as a nation. And asking the nation to provide the elements for flourishing the individual. So I tend to say to the new generation, you have to be in this idea. To ask your rulers, you have to deliver the best scenario for our flourishing. We are not going to be the product of ambitions of one or the other. We are going to be the first or the second generation that we are going to inaugurate the era of the intelligence in this planet. And then finally, there is a final question for all of us. It was the big scientist, Steve Hopkins, who was asked, what do you think is the destiny of humanity? And he said, in my view, all is so complex. We have in this galaxy only in the Milky Way, we have 400 billion stars. Also is so big that to think that we are something really unique is too pretentious on our side. But I think we will have a role that is to be the bees of pollination with intelligence, the universe. So this is a key thing to know. If we are going to go to the outer space, how will we go? As humanity was unable to organize itself in planet Earth and create a culture of harmony, and then had to escape to the outer space to try to see another opportunity, or we will go to the outer space as one unique species that knew how to create harmony among themselves. Because we have to think that in this planet, we are now benefiting of a unique situation. We have apparently no enemy except ourselves. We could be a species that could not touch the water in the ocean, because as soon as we put the hand in the water, we are infected with an allergy that we die. We could not fly because maybe there would be such a powerful bird that could make this use of the air impossible for us. Or we could have some kind of animals in some part of the planet that had the territory and we could not go. At this moment, the whole planet is for us. We can fly, we can navigate, everything is for us. The only problem is we are not able to organize ourselves well. We have made great progress, because when you think that it's only in the last 100 years that we have created the first bodies to have the common dialogue among us, is a great breakthrough. Obviously, the first one, that was the League of Nations, only survived 20 years, but it was like a first baby that at least it existed. The second one, that is the United Nations, it has already survived for 80 years. And the big advantage is at the end, in this map of rivers, we have already mapped that we have only 190 rivers. Very big rivers sometimes, like the Ganges or the Rhine, that is India, China. Medium rivers that can be rivers like United States or Nigeria in terms of population, and very small rivers like Liechtenstein or Andorra. But we have at the end 190 in this mosaic to try to dialogue. It's a big breakthrough. So the new generation is the one who has to say, oh, this is not useless. Let's go to invent something new, because every time we invent something new, it takes a long time and it's not very easy to do. Is the one who says, with what it exists, we want to put the perspective much further. We don't. What interests me is the one who will invent the new medicine and the new vaccine against malaria is a human being. It don't mind if it's from Zimbabwe, if it's from Algeria, from Spain, from Finland, the United States. I want that the new generation appears as the one whose unique objective is humanity and having the great experience in this planet. Thank you very much.
Well, I was just wondering, you would be in the wrong service all along.
No, because I think that the states are essential.
In the sense that you have a worldview that is so positive, so built on the concept of total harmony and peace and joining together to make sure that the future of the humanity is not only safe, but it is also working together cooperatively in so many areas that the life on planet can be far better than it is. And the interesting thing is that you've drawn analogies from nature in order to suggest ways in which people in various countries, various parts of the planet can organize themselves on the patterns that nature has shown us and work in harmony. I don't know. I hope you have a chance to talk to President Trump, maybe.
Well, something I forgot to say is that, in my view, there were two countries that could take the lead to make this real. Maybe only two, that were United States and India. I will tell you why. On one side, United States, why? Because Everything started with only 3 million people in one small part of the Atlantic. They created a constitution in 1787, so a long time ago, only 3 million people, very, very compact people, group of most people from Great Britain, Ireland, Anglo-Saxon people, very complex, very compact. Okay, in 250 years, they have gone from a small territory to a big territory, from east to west. You know? From very compact group, they have gone to a very diverse group with everybody there. People from Asia, from Africa, from Latin America, from very basic economy and agriculture. They have gone to industry, they have gone to services, they have gone to digital, all that. And the same way of organizing the world, the internal life, with obviously some amendments for new situations, it has resisted. It has created the rules of the game. You know. So I thought, well, if you have been from 3 million to 330 as it is now, so they have multiplied by 100. You could propose with artificial intelligence a model of how the whole 8 billion we could have a common way of living and understanding. And I thought that with the pandemic, that was a very exciting moment because the pandemic had shown that the only two people in dialogue were the virus and the human being. It didn't mind, it was not important if the human being was living in Africa, in Asia, in Europe, or the United States. It was affected the same. So the key thing is how we have the humanity in common tasks. Instead of that, the United States went in the other direction. So we have lost, in my view, for a short time, I hope, a very important leader for this new moment. The other one is India. Why? Because India, you know, in the basic history, you know, of the country, and I hope not to make too much mistake. When it becomes independent in this part, you have not one single India into a certain extent. You have states that they have armies. In Karnataka, there was another ruler, etc. Well, in a very short time, you have created a single space with a kind of global rules for everybody. So there are no internal armies in India for these 1.5 billion people. This can look very easy, but it's not so easy because when you look at Latin America, very young, vibrant societies, but we have still 27 armies. When we see Europe, we have created a big space with single market, single currency, but we have still 30 or 32 states with different armies. India has gone very fast in this way of restructuring the political space, you know, and how to create a single currency, a capacity of movement. People from Calcutta can open a business in Kerala, people in Pune can go to Maharashtra. So, you know, it's the second largest state that you say, well, you will have created an order for 1.5 billion people that they can move, that they can pay, that there is only police, there is no internal army. Why is it so difficult to go to the 8 billion people dimension? So this should not be seen as something unrealistic. The only thing is where you put the center of gravity. The center of gravity is going to consider the individual, each individual as a masterpiece, or we're going to consider the individual as a part of a group that has to have a will of power and superiority. That is the key thing. So, as it is said many times, the culture of peace starts in the mind of the young people. And that I think we have an important role to play in.
A short comment, and then I think we will ask from the audience if there are any questions. I'm sure there would be. It's just this. I don't want to be lighthearted. That if we can't use our collective intelligence to shape the world in the way you have described, and it is the ideal world, then I don't know how artificial intelligence is going to be able to do that. Because the artificial intelligence is going to be the product sum total of the intelligence that we have in humanity. So, so I'm still trying to figure out how artificial intelligence, in many areas, of course, it will be to the benefit of people in the health sector and this and that. And what you said just now in terms of communication and talking to each other, all these are very interesting perspectives about how artificial intelligence can bind us together and hopefully, therefore, make everybody who's a stranger to you much more human. And you can then relate to that person so much more easily. And the sum total of the wisdom of the populations of the world can be easily available to everybody and then creates a certain sense of belonging and togetherness and respect for each other. That unity in diversity that we talk about. But I think the issue of the other aspects of artificial intelligence, which worry a lot of people about what the impact of that would be. And in this competitive kind of situation that is arising, where countries are competing with each other to maintain the lead in artificial intelligence, and the amount of money that the high tech in the United States is investing in this, and I think the Satya Nadella said something a couple of days ago that it can all be a bubble and it can recoil on all of us. And they're now trying to find ways and means how they can make sure that it doesn't end into a disaster. And there's some kind of circular um thing about supporting each other to prevent an economic disaster that is being figured out. So anyway, that were larger questions, and we're not going to be able to resolve them here. But I'm sure, given the highly stimulating talk that you have given and so many new perspectives that we don't think about normally, I'm sure there are questions. Please introduce yourself and ask the question. Yes. You will? Okay.
I share my experience. During pandemic COVID, I was in Spain. I was at the University of Valladolid at that time. And language was a huge problem. It's very difficult to communicate because I don't know Spanish and most of the people do not know English, including the professors there. And I wish there is an AI app like that where we are able to communicate easily. But that situation hasn't even yet. What I'm trying to say, at that point of time, there was a lot of vaccine issue there. We didn't have medicines, we didn't have masks there also. So for days together, we were confined in the house because one could not even go out, to buy stuff because shops were not letting us in without masks or gloves, etc. Some part of the world, in India also, we didn't have that kind of shortage, whereas Spain was really badly affected, Italy was affected. I realized that even though we felt our humanity, but it is the corporate world and that world which creates vaccine, they start competing with each other. So do you think when you have reset and they start, the world order, will their characteristic change and they start thinking of the human values and shared values, or will the profit and competition with each other take a backseat?
Can we have three questions together? That might be easier.
Well, thank you, sir. And I think it was really fascinating questions that you have concept for your own studies. I think you really gave very interesting ideas of future, including what is the area of mobility. But one thing is that, after listening to you, it's going to be great equalizer in a sense, because most people will have similar kind of information in the long run. As we have seen already, like when we were doing research 30 years back, information itself was a problem. Now information is absolutely not a problem. All across the world, you get the same information at the same time. But another point also you made, that actually human beings are going to be the center. if that is what the case is, it means the more the numbers you have, countries which have higher numbers, physical, I mean, then those will have greater possibilities of framing the rules. So countries like China, India, and the United States and other. And where do you really situate in that sense Europe? Because you come from Europe, and Europe has, they will not have in the long run really strengthen the numbers, because that's what is led to the demography is. And now, if you look at all even the Draghi committee report and others, and even just I was, listening to President Trump yesterday when he was talking to Politico, his views about Europe and what is happening in Ukraine and in that context. So, yes, many things will happen, but from the European studies, and you come from Europe, where do you situate in this kind of situation, the future of Europe?
Yeah, I think we can go ahead with these two. Yeah.
Well, on the first, on the first one, on the pandemia, I think we cannot still this conscious in the new generation to put more openly the questions to the public authorities. This has been a pandemia that we had more or less the instruments to identify who was infected and who was not infected. When we had other pandemias, like, for example, how the name in English, peste. Peste is the big epidemic in the 16th century.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a plague.
You had not
Plague.
the instrument to identify. Here you have the instrument to identify. So at a certain moment, I asked the authority in my area, in Balearic Islands, say, why don't you mobilize the students of medicine to take the test? Because obviously every individual could take the test him or herself. But at the beginning, you don't know how to do. You say, you have been studying medicine for 4 years, how you will not be able to make one test? And people say, no, they are not prepared for that. I say, well, what is the use of studying medicine 4 years if you don't even know how to put a cotton in your nose, So we didn't know how to mobilize our resources. It was very strange way of managing that. So I think that is a clear example that innovation has to be at the forefront. We cannot go and say, no, we block the people, etc. No, think what are the instruments you have. You have the army is one thing, but you have also the students in the university who are studying medicine, and you have an epidemic. These people have to be in the forefront of helping the population, and they were not mobilized. So I think that we have missed a big opportunity, because if this pandemic, instead of causing some deaths and creating some problems in the way of breathing, it was a pandemic that as soon as you were infected, you became blind. We would have maybe 200 million blind people in the planet. So this is something that the university has to transmit to the new generation. Health has to be a top priority. Why? First, because 100 years ago, let's say, money was not the essential thing for the improvement of medicine, because we had to overcome some concepts. For example, in Europe, the man who discovered that the blood was circulated was killed with burning oil for going against the principles of the church. So it was not only a question of money, it was a question of what could you investigate. Now it's a question of money. If you put billions of dollars into medicine, the breakthrough will be impressive. So they have solved us. The key thing is environment. Okay, but environment maybe will be a disaster in 30 years. Medicine is something that takes only 24 hours. If there is a virus that I say you became blind or deaf as soon as you are infected, when you are infected with a cold, you are only with a cold. It's not so terrible. But when the same virus affects your nerve and you become blind or deaf, it's immediate. So this pandemic has been an advertisement to humanity that has to put health at the center. And we have misled that, in my view. So it would be nice from universities to say to the new generations, we have been very much in favor of climate protection, but health has to be the priority. About the other thing, it was very interesting question on who will create the new order and how we the larger states will have more possibilities. Well, it depends. I think that the key thing to pass to the new generation, or what I would like to pass to the generation, is the center is the human being, the person, Mr. Agarwal or Mr. Sibal. It's not that if he's Indian, or he's Sri Lankese, or he's Spanish. They are living in a certain part of the geography, but the key thing is the individual. And what we should try to do is to create the rules for this community. One day I was in this interesting debate in St. Petersburg, the Likachov conference, and it was the son of Kenneth Galbraith. And he's a very top sociologist, and he was asked, Doctor, what do you think is the key for development? And he said, the key for development is not education, although it's very important. The key for development is not financing, although it's very important. The key for development is how you organize the game. And you see, when we go, we go to sports. Something that I know obviously is football more than cricket. But in cricket will be the same thing. In football, what is the key thing is who are the football players, that it will be quality. But if you have not agreed on the rules of the game, you cannot play. You say that each part is 45 minutes, that is only one balloon, that is one referee. Okay, they are very elemental things, because to say instead of 45 minutes, each part will be 1 hour and a half. You change the resistance of the players, you change everything. Instead of one balloon, you put 3 balloons, you destroy the game. The person who puts 2 extra balloons says, I don't understand how the game now is so boring, because each balloon only costs 10 euros, and now nobody's playing well, and these players cost 2 million, $3 million dollars, and now it's not a good game. You have fully destroyed because you have changed a very minor rule, but it was the key of the architecture of the game. So in this world, it's the same thing. I think we have to create. There has been some nation, who proposed a global order of humanity. And then once you have the global order of humanity, obviously you will have a very volcanic humanity, because maybe today, of these 8 billion people in the world, the drivers of this humanity, there are only 100,000 people. 100,000 people. The rest, they are following, they are adapting. The day that you will have 8 billion people creators, this is a hyper-volcanic society, and it will have another way to live together. It will be totally different. About Europe, that you mentioned, well, there are 2 things to be considered. First, robots will have a great role in our societies in very short time. So the loss of physical capacity of many Europeans, in my view, will be very much matched by the services that will make robots to them. Now, for example, we have every old people who need someone to be taken care of. So normally you take a migrant coming, in the case of Spain, from Latin America, in the case of France, from North Africa, etc., to take care of the poor grandfather who is 82 and cannot move very well and needs time. In very short time, this service will be made by a robot. So there will be anti-aging going very fast. They say that in 4 years' time, the treatments for anti-aging will be exponentially effective. In 10 years' time, the possibility of reverting the age will be very, very much a reality. So, all this world is going to know a totally different era, and it's what I wanted a little bit to share with you. Totally different. So, we have to think. I don't see, to be honest, a crisis in Europe. Europe has a serious problem on how to organize it in the driving seat. This is not an easy thing. In my view, the Americans, they have organized it well because they have not a direct election of the president. They have an election through the elected people in the different states, but at the end it's recognized that the president of the United States is superior to each governor. you know in Europe, we created the Treaty of Lisbon to create the figure of Mr. Europe, who will be the one running the union. And we managed to approve this treaty in all the countries through referendum. But in the moment to choose the person, well, the different states have not give the step ahead to recognize that this one is superior to each individual in the union. So there is really the big problem. On the other hand, in the societies as such, in my view, Europe is a very vibrant state. And when I see the map of cities in Europe and the map of cities in the United States, I think that the map of cities in Europe is much superior. In United States, maybe you have 20 very vibrant cities. In Europe, maybe you have 120 vibrant cities. With the universities, with factories, quite harmonic, quite integrated. So, from the point of view of society, I am not very worried about the future and the present of future, about the way to organize this space in someone in the driving seat. That is the issue. But, it is a very important thing because who you put in the driving seat is very important. We had once a very sophisticated society that was Germany in the 20s, in the 30s, obviously having a crisis, but Germany maybe was the country in 1930 with a higher proportion of top musicians in Europe, the top philosophers, the top inventors in the different techniques in science, culture, the top. Once someone took the driving seat and being a devil, that was Adolf Hitler, in only 4 years or 5 years, the country moved from being a very cultivated society and to be a very difficult society and starting a very cruel and terrible war. So who you put in the driving seat is complicated. I have to say that the Americans, in my view, they have found a good system. Other countries like India is also working well. It's recognized who is in the driving seat. Europe maybe has the problem that we have not still found a way to create the rules to have all the Europeans recognizing who is in the driving seat.
Last question, I think.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you, Ambassador, for that very interesting exposition, especially centering human being and decentering the state, the nation state. So even as we look at the global politics, what we find, especially in the context of the discussion that we've had on the importance of peace, I would like to bring another word, which is power, that is actually driving the global politics. So in such a context, when you basically contrast peace with power, and then sometimes we actually negate the importance of principles of equality, dignity, and justice, especially for those on the margins. I'm glad we talked about bringing human beings to the same time. But then what about those on the margins, the minorities? And, for instance, in India, the Dalit community, and in some of the, European countries, you have minorities who are the marginals. So when you see, uh, you know, the world moving towards, especially when you're actually highlighting the importance of human beings to be in the driving force, that's one. And the other important issue that you highlighted in your discussion is about universities. In fact, universities are a microcosm of civil society. When there is this amazing contestation between state and civil society, and the state is trying to, in many ways, control the civil society, including in India and in many other, countries in the global south. What kind of future do you see for the, universities and civil society to take or to make states more accountable to people, to human beings? Thank you.
We'll have one student also ask the last question, okay?
Thank you, Ambassador. I've had the opportunity to read through parts of most of the parts of the your book yesterday. So it was quite gripping, I should say. I mean, the building of the narrative arc following this protagonist node is quite fascinating. If I can ask one or two questions. So, I mean, firstly, congratulations on the book and thank you. It's quite fascinating. Firstly, I'm struck by the opening page itself when you reveal that this protagonist Noor was born in Damascus and future war immigrated to Hamburg in Germany. And when you talk about later in the book on building this one humanity, I couldn't but see some contrast in there. That obviously we all saw the history of the rise of xenophobia in Europe and many other parts of the world after the Civil War. And obviously, instead of bringing the world together, the borders have been built more rigidly. So, how do you see questions like immigration being tackled in your vision when you talk about envisioning a humanity which is united? And secondly, questions of democracy that several faculty have alluded to. You also, you place a lot of emphasis on technology innovation and, as I said, hope for building this kind of humanity. But closely linked to this is also the question of democracy. We have seen, say, for instance, on the other major challenge that the world faces currently, the climate crisis. We've seen how instead of opening up technologies to the poorer parts of the world, we've seen more IP regimes being brought in, more intellectual property regimes being built in, and more restricted access. And even when technology is provided to the poorer parts of the world, it's mostly through the market system where your profit is quite linked to it. So how do you deal with this question of democratic access to technology? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for your very wise questions. Concerning the first one, I would say that we have made, in my view, great progress in all the fields of they consider applying to the whole humanity. It doesn't matter the country, the area. So, in my view, is a great breakthrough. Then we have the problem that is a little bit philosophical. Why the bad goes so fast and the good takes so long time? If you want to build here a big auditorium, maybe it will take 4 years. First to decide where you build it, who's going to build, who's going to finance, what will be the program. It takes 4 years. To destroy the auditorium, it takes 10 seconds if there is an earthquake. It takes 2 hours if there is a fire. It's not the other way around. There is no way to build something in 10 seconds and to need 4 years to be destroyed. So I say that because we have gone from 4 billion people in this world to 8 billion people in this world, and nobody cares. Says, oh, well, we're more people. If tomorrow there was a pandemic, a war, there were 100 million people dead, it could be considered a catastrophe to the humanity. And we would have gone from 8 billion to 7 billion 900, So we have considered new 4 billion people as normal and 100 million deaths as a total disaster. So we are all the time showing what is bad as a terrible thing and not taking into consideration what is good. So there are things like, for example, in apartheid in South Africa has lasted a long time, and it was abolished and it was overpassed. There was also apartheid in the United States until 1968 or 1970. We cannot ignore that the leader of the anti-apartheid movement, Martin Luther King, was killed there. And the Americans, they had, let's say, a people with origin in Ghana as president of the United States. So this is an area where the movements are very fast. So minorities, I think, are more protected today than how they were protected 20 years ago. Maybe they are not better protected today as they will be protected in 5 years, maybe, if certain movements continue to go, but maybe this is related to the capacity, the rhythm of capacity of the societies to adapt to new situations. But it is obvious that the North is towards a highest respect of the diversity, in my view. How we manage to have this new world? Well, I think India has a particularly important role, because I have said in other occasions, I think India deserves to be a member of the Security Council in the United Nations for many reasons. Obviously, the largest democracy in the world, the largest population in the world, so it is obvious. But India, in my view, has also another argument that nobody is using at this moment, is that India should be a kind of factor of harmony in the world. It should be the advocate of the diversity and respect. I don't like particularly when India says, I want to be a member of the Security Council because I want to be the sixth powerful country in this security. It's a question of power. All the other five are sitting there as power, and I want to sit as power. No, I want to sit there because I'm going to be different. I'm going to be the one driving for this world of inclusiveness, of difference. So I think it's our hope, because the others are playing more in the classical game, and we're in the 21st, we're not in the 19th century. About your question on how people will have access to technology and they can be in more egalitarian basis. Well, I think that science is progressing very much in the direction of having prices every time lower. A blood analysis that was very complete on all your different vitamins, on the different elements, very complete thing. It costed about $8,000 20 years ago. Now it costs $80. So, it's dramatic how things are falling. Obviously, the rate will be different, and in my view, the universities, they have the key role in the education of the new generation to be the very enlightened people to ask for better governance at all the different stages of all innovation. I think that is the key thing. The nature already shows us that this is not an egalitarian planet. This is a planet full of diversity. If you put 3 trees together, after 25 years, no tree has the same size, has the same weight. So diversity is the key. And in the future, these 8 billion people will be 8 billion intelligent units of very powerful energy. So all will be diverse. But you have to have the system on how the one who is going backwards can onwards later, how all the game can be played. Is more a question, in my view, of dynamic than on aesthetics. Statics. It's not going to be, you are not going to have a static photograph of everybody is equal, everybody has the same opportunity. It's going to have a dynamic picture on how people, if they organize well, if they know to get their strengths, they can go up. Thank you.
Well, Ambassador, you are a congenital optimist, and your optimism is infectious. Very, very stimulating. May I request Dr. Keshav to say the last word before we wind up?
It is my privilege to deliver the vote of thanks on behalf of the School of International Studies to the Chancellor of JNU, Ambassador Kanwal. So we are really grateful for the time he's taken out to be with us today, despite feeling a bit under the weather. So thank you really much, sir. And then, of course, to the speaker for today, we extend our deepest gratitude to His Excellency Ambassador Juan Antonio March Pujol for an enlightening and thought-provoking deliberations on the Great Reset. Yeah, your insights into the shifting global landscape, the existential and political challenges of our age, and his special emphasis on the ways humanity might need to manage the changes have left us with much to reflect upon. The depth of analysis, of course, comes from your profound experience with having traveled all over. And I also want to thank all my colleagues who have been here, the students especially, because of your insightful questions, engagements. It really enhanced the quality of today's sessions. Ambassador, I must confess that your conversation today must have catalyzed a dialogue which is human-centric at the school, especially amongst the new generation. And they will have a lot of takeaway from this. Thank you very much, and we look forward to having you again, because we could see the time.
Thank you.
Give him a big hand. Ambassador,
Thank you very much.
very stimulating.
Thank you.